Local
Okay.
recordings. I think we are live, aren't we?
I think we're live.
Well,
Hi, guys.
y'all.
It says we are on my side.
If you can see us and hear us, say the word.
The word. Well, I can, but I'm connected. to
Woot,
you.
says Zoe. All right. Yep. We's here. We's here. Eileen, I like your all lower caps for your name. It's very social.
You know,
of you.
I was real focused on my audio, but then I thought, it's a style. Let's just go
It
with
is a style.
it. You
There. I've
It totally
done it
is a
too.
style. In fact, when
I'm there with you.
like my handle,
thank
Sarah
you.
Lane. When I
Oh.
tell people like, oh, here's my handle on most things, like I just, it's all lowercase, all one word,
Yeah.
Sarah Lane.
Yeah. Sometimes I'm just lazy and I don't want to use the pinky on the shift. So,
I also feel like if I know somebody well enough to be like, I know how to capitalize things. I'm just not doing that right now. There are certain times applying for a job, I would
Yeah.
capitalize things.
Yes, there are certain times
Yeah.
that certainly call for it, almost, required.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jason
real
Howell's
quick.
here, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody.
Quick reminder, I will be putting the break in the show notes once the time comes.
In our private chat.
In the show notes on the doc.
Got it.
Yep.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
Hey,
Once we
real
hit about
quick.
the halfway mark, I'll go ahead and put it in there to let you know that it's coming up on our next opportunity.
Hey, real quick, Amos. It's showing me that I'm again running out of storage space on this device, which my device has
I get
like.
that every single time.
Oh, do you? Okay, because I
Every
did
single
like.
time. Yeah, and I
Is it
have
iCloud telling you that?
256 gigs available, so it is.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering because I have tons of space on. I just
Yeah.
double checked.
I've never
my
not got
computer.
that on this machine. I don't know why.
Oh.
There's probably some sort of weird permissions thing. You know what I mean? That's
Okay,
not
'cause-
actually sending StreamYard the actual information. I honestly don't know what it is, but I've gotten it every single
it's a
time I've used
StreamYard
StreamYard on this
thing.
machine.
Yeah, it's a StreamYard
Yeah.
thing because
Oh.
what happened was
I've never gotten
because
that.
I always ask Amos to get the local recordings because I
Yeah.
like to for social cuts and stuff. Although last week I did run it, this made it. It said you ran out of space, so my local recording stopped halfway through, which it was fine. I was able to kind of deal with the main show. The main show is the most important, and able
Yeah.
to mess with the edit for the show, and it's just for our social cuts. It's not so dependent on the main show for the audio recording and everything. But it was just kind of a bummer. I was like, well, how do I fix this? And then when I looked in StreamYard, it said I had plenty of space. So
Yeah.
I was very confused.
Yeah.
StreamYard
I'll do
has
some research in
been
the off week or in the
Okay.
off between shows. I'll do some research and see if we
Yeah.
can come up with a solution before next week in case it does happen again this week.
Yeah, it doesn't affect the main show.
can do weird things. I mean,
Yeah.
I have for some time now been getting recording error, uploading recording error.
Okay.
To the
Okay.
point where I used to be during DTNS, I'm like, oh, Joe, I don't know what's going on, and he's like, no, it's fine. Just ignore it. And I'm like,
definitely have
okay,
that.
I will, but
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I have plenty of space on my computer, so I don't know, and iCloud too. I've been deleting stuff, so. All right.
You're fine.
I had
StreamYard's just a
we
unique little
can save it for the show. This is actually an interesting conversation of where is all the, storage being taken from? At least for me,
Where's all
I
the
have been
storage
digging into that
gone?
long enough to be like, oh, interesting messages. Okay. Yeah.
I know, right? And let me delete all the attachments that friends are, putting. My sister
It adds
sends me
up.
all the
Yeah.
movies,
It totally adds
of
up.
my nieces, and I'm like, well, I have them on iPhotos now. Why do I still have them on my messages? So let me just clear that and whatever.
Right. Yeah. And if you,
That's what I say.
Yeah. Backing up all this stuff used to be so simple because I had less stuff and less machines. And now I've had, half dozen machines over the years. And every time I get a new machine, it's like, okay, well, I'll take whatever's over here in all these folders and put them in a folder on this new one named that machine. And now I've just got there's no organization other than that. It's just random stuff in this folder from that machine, random stuff in the, yeah.
I know.
You know what we need? We need AI to help us clear all this stuff up.
Well, maybe you can help clear that up for us on the main show.
Because Eileen and I clearly have no idea what's going on. So,
well, neither do I.
Willie Scott called us vision. I don't know if you meant to say visionaries or just visionaires. I like both.
Visionaries.
I like visionaries.
Visionaries.
I like visionaries. I like visionaries.
Apple visionaires.
Visionaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like a fancy kind
official.
of mustard.
Fancy.
A visionaire,
super fancy.
if you will.
All right, are we
I think I'm pumped. Let's do this.
Amos,
Let's
hit
do
it.
Well, hello, everybody. This is Apple Vision Show, episode 6?
7.
7. We've been doing it so long, I don't even know what day it is anymore.
I'm already celebrating, Sarah.
Hello,
You know
Eileen Rivera.
Well, hello, Sarah Lane. Welcome to our episode 7. I love it. I love to celebrate with our emojis that the audio listeners can't see, but that's okay.
There are many, many balloons in Eileen Rivera's studio right now, and I am very jealous because balloons are fun, unless you have a fear of balloons, which some people do. I have learned this.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah,
that's
new. You know,
there's a fear of everything, right?
There's a fear of everything. We are not afraid, though, of Jason Howell, who is joining us, our second guest ever. Hello, Jason Howell.
Really good to see you, and good to see you when I'm not feeling sick, which 2 weeks ago I was supposed to come on, and I ended up feeling really not good the morning of, so I had to cancel. I'm really sorry about that, but I'm happy to be here today.
Well, we are so happy to have you. We're glad you're feeling better and all good. Life happens.
It happens.
Life happens.
Even to podcasters. We get sick too. We're human too.
Yes. Do you remember? Okay, this is so non sequitur, and I'm getting to this really early, but remember Martha Quinn, the MTV DJ?
Oh, yeah.
She used to do Noxema or Neutrogena, skincare commercials where she's like, zits happen even to Martha Quinn. That was the commercial where I remember being like, well, I'm quite a bit younger than you and I have a problem with that, so I'm going to buy your product.
It was effective.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Speaking to the right
I tried all
audience.
of them. Stridex pads.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, you're going through puberty. You're like, whatever helps. Just
whatever helps. Yeah, I will.
Where's Martha
I would
Quinn when I
literally
need her?
kill my layer of skin just to, yeah. Maybe I'll be a VJ one day.
Yes. That's
because
like
you're
that's on
using
the
her
resume, checkbox. It has to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, we sort of achieved that goal, or it was my goal when I was a child. This is VJ-esque. It is,
Yeah.
Podcasting is, it gives a lot of us a voice that we might not have had otherwise. So,
well, I mean, if MTV VJs were people who were there to facilitate the delivery of music videos and to talk about the videos themselves and everything, we help facilitate the delivery of tech news from the various sources. So the sources that we're reading that we'll talk about today are like music videos, is essentially what I'm saying. They're like the same thing.
Hello, tie it together.
Yep.
I know it's almost like you've been doing this for a while, Jason Howell. Now, listen, Jason Howell, Eileen and I know you. We love you. We've worked with you in the past. You are part of Android Faithful, which is a DTNS umbrella show. But tell us what you're doing with AI these days.
Well, somewhere along the lines, well, actually, probably right about the point that All About Android was canceled at Twit, I started thinking, what are some other things that I'm interested in? And, I mean, I don't know if you've heard this or not, but AI is kind of like a big deal right now.
Haven't.
And for me personally, it was like, what we're seeing from this like modern kind of moment in artificial intelligence, this like generative thing, has the potential to be really creative. And I'm a creative person. So when I saw initially what some of these systems were able to do, and let me tell you, there's a lot of people that feel strongly that it should be able to do it versus not should be able to do it. That's a whole other story. But when I saw what it was capable of doing now, and so seemingly easily, it got my kind of mind moving in a million different directions as far as like, okay, well, what is the potential of this as we go forward? So I've been working on a podcast called AI Inside with Jeff Jarvis, who a lot of, people here probably have heard of Jeff, through Twit and This Week in Google and so many millions of other things that he keeps himself busy with. So I'm super grateful to have him. And we just talk about, what's going on in AI every week, every Wednesday. And sometimes we bring on some guests to talk about what they know. And yeah, it's really, honestly, it's been really a selfish project for me to a degree, because it's been like, how can I learn more about AI? I know, I'll start a podcast about it. And that's what we're doing.
Well,
that's perfect.
that's I think that's, especially when it comes to emerging technology. Not every podcast is going to be about, what we talk about, but this is definitely one of those shows. Eileen and I always, are careful to say to people, we call it Apple Vision Show, which sounds like Apple Vision Pro because we love rhyming.
I like
but,
that,
the Apple Vision Pro is just one part of the entire Apple ecosystem that we try to touch on every week, depending on, what the news is, what we've been fiddling around with, what we've learned, what other people can teach us. So, again, we're all in this together, and we're so glad to have you, Jason.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to be here. Like a lot of what I've done in the past has been Android and AI, most recent months. So I rarely get an opportunity to spend kind of quality time with Apple news and stuff. So I really appreciate the invite, because there's a lot of crossover today.
And crossover with Android Faithful as well. So our sister show. And
Indeed. Just going down to the basics of, I don't know if you want to go, Apple versus Google, who's, going to win in the race to be like the coolest company ever. Interesting news as of our recording today. These are sources from Bloomberg. This is Mark Gurman. He is notoriously has very good sources for Apple news. But those sources tell Gurman that Apple and Google are in active talks to potentially use Gemini to power some new iPhone features starting at some point this year. Not necessarily on-device features, because Apple is apparently still very invested in Siri, or whatever Siri is going to be at some point, but cloud features powered by Gemini. Kind of crazy. Got a lot of buzz today. What do we all think about that?
Well, this is interesting, because when I think about Apple and AI, let's say their AI strategy or whatever, I think there's not a whole lot to go off of, because Apple has done with AI, it seems, what it's really good at doing and has proven to do in a lot of other instances, which is it doesn't move immediately on these things. But it does eventually. Like, it would be really surprising if Apple didn't have something like this at some point, right? But the fact that Apple's not there with this going full board quite yet, it's easy to look at Apple and be like, oh, well, why are they so behind, blah, blah, blah. But, this is just Apple kind of playing the field a little bit and trying to take its time on this quickly emerging technology, this quickly emerging kind of I don't know, you're going to see this all over the place. You already are in the world of Android. You're seeing a lot of these like integrations of AI into the OS, and how can we take this AI system and integrate it into this device that we're using on a daily basis. Apple not quite there yet, but I don't think it's because they've been sleeping on it. I think they're just really careful about the partners that they choose and the features that they're going to, that are going to happen and come out of a partnership like this. So I do think it's interesting that Apple is, they're talking with Google about the Gemini. They're also, it sounds like, according to this report, in some sort of open discussion with OpenAI, which is arguably I'd say the most buzz generating player of the last year.
Right. It would be ChatGPT, I guess, if it wasn't Gemini. Yeah. If that was, this is, again, these are in extended talks type rumors,
Yeah.
where it's
Right.
like, this
Apple's
stuff.
talking about everything, by the way, behind the
Yeah.
scenes that we don't even know
Yeah.
about. They don't all happen.
Exactly.
Originally, we were going to have you on a couple weeks when the car project was shut down,
Yeah.
and we had heard that they were going to move those resources, or a lot of the resources, over to AI. But this is even more timelier, news. It's almost like, oh no, the universe is saying, let's have Jason on a couple weeks later. It's going to be bigger, more important to talk about. And now the memes are online, and there's a 2017 photo that people are bringing back up of Tim Cook and Sundar having dinner at Cheesecake Factory, and
I
they're
remember
like
this.
doing the like
Yes.
memes. So it's an old photo that I saw, and I was like, wait, is this real? I'm like realizing,
Was it at the
this is old.
Cheesecake Factory? I did not know that detail.
Apparently,
I mean,
Are
first
you
of
serious?
all,
That's the
first of
Cheesecake
all,
Factory?
I love the Cheesecake Factory. You give me a menu with 200 pages. I like your restaurant. I'm never gonna say an ill word. But I mean, if you okay, so let's say, and again, these are rumors. Apple at this, at the time of our recording, things change quickly around these parts. But Apple and Google getting together to use Google's Gemini AI technology. People would say, "Oh, this just proves that Apple just they just couldn't catch up." Apple may have not even bothered to catch up. I think Apple, according to Tim Cook, Apple has been working on all sorts of AI behind the scenes, and I believe that's absolutely true. It's Apple after all. But if it makes more sense to partner with a company that serves Apple consumers well, Apple doesn't care. They don't care.
Yeah.
They don't need to have we're better than Gemini and here's our thing. It kind of reminds me of like Apple Maps versus Google Maps back in the day. We have pitted these two companies against each other. Safari versus Chrome. I mean, the list goes on, and I think I would welcome more of a partnership going forward. I really would.
Yeah, can we not? Can we just be okay with a kumbaya moment for both companies? Can we be okay
No,
with
the
that?
EU says you cannot be okay with this because of anti-competitive behavior. I think
there's
that's
that,
also
yeah.
going to be a really
There's that on the
interesting
table. Yes.
avenue here, which is, the EU's already cracking down big time on big tech. And of course, here in the US, there's a lot of threatenings happening there as well. And I'm sure, time will tell as far as what some of those changes are going to be here. And if we go from the example that the EU is setting forward, there's going to be a lot of reason for companies like Apple and Google to really change the kind of way they're used to doing things. But you got, the two of these companies working together on search, that was too big for the EU and possibly the US. And now you got them working together. It's kind of like a perfect storm, working together on this new kind of proliferation of AI that by many people is seen as like a major gobbler of literally all things online. And I think you just have a perfect storm of a lot more regulatory attention that neither company probably wants, but maybe they feel like they know enough about the relationship to be able to navigate through those waters. I don't know.
Right.
In our chat, W. Scottus1 said, Apple is always late to the game. Oculus, around for literally over a decade before the Vision Pro came out. True.
Right.
Going back to, I just don't think Apple cares. Apple wants to be, premium product. They don't need to be first. Yes, they have reinvented the wheel here and there. The iPhone, great example of that. Where, for a long time, and I think, we're past the point where other companies are copying Apple. Like the smartphone industry is often running, and there are a lot of things that other companies do that Apple doesn't. And Jason, I would love to pick your brain on some of that while we have you on the show. But I don't think Apple cares about being first in the AI game as long as whatever. Let's just say that the Apple and Google Gemini, kumbaya thing, handshake thing goes forward. And it sounds like, that's some cloud stuff. Does that make CarPlay better for me? If so, I'm in. I do not care. I do not care if you were first or last, but just let's make CarPlay better.
Yeah,
So
at the end of the day, it's about the consumers, and hopefully, I know that they're both businesses, and they both need to make money and want to make money, and I'm sure they're both competitive. There's all of those things that a company is about, and the bottom line is making the money, right? But they are providing resources for the consumer, and that's what this show is about. It's like, how is this news going to affect the end user? And to your point, Sarah, like, make this easier for us, make things talk to each other easier for us, make our lives easier. That is really the point of all of this, even though it could go astray at any point in time. It is really like, how do I not have to like think about the recipe for can I just say it and it happens? I don't have to look at like 5,000 choices and please give me the thing that that I like because I've asked for it numerous times and you've learned what I like, right? Those are things that at the end of the day will make us all like breathe a little bit more, hopefully. Now, again, there's caveats to everything. There's things that can go wayward and, nefarious ways of using AI. But at the end of the day, again, I just feel like the point of it all is for us and to use things in a way that progresses our society for the better. That is me with rose-colored glasses going, but it could be all great. But I know very well that there's stuff behind the scenes that could make it, negative as well. So hopefully,
there's a lot of talk about, and I'm not just talking about Siri, but Amazon's Assistant, which is what I use at home. I don't use HomeKit I don't really have a good reason. I just kind of set it up with Amazon some time ago, and my smart lights and a lot of my routines are just they're working on that system. But I could start from scratch and get basically the same result if I went with Apple's models. And it's funny, whenever somebody comes over, for example, my mom has been visiting, and she's well aware of what I do for a living and knows that I like nerdy things and I like to go down rabbit holes. But she's never been to this apartment that I live in right now, where I was like, oh, so here's how you talk to the lights. Okay, so if you're in your living room, this is what you say. If you're in the bedroom, this is what you say. If you like that light, but you want it to be like kind of different, this is how you tell it to, and she's like, oh God, but it's
syntax.
Like, and if you, the syntax is, it's not rocket science, but it's not natural language either.
No.
Yeah.
And it's more natural language now than it was, a handful of years ago or whatever when this stuff was starting. They did improve it over time for it to get a little bit smarter. But then in the last couple of years, what we've seen, I think, has gotten a lot more people's imaginations going with where we're headed. And I think I totally agree with what you were saying, Eileen. I think at the end of the day, I've been looking at 2024 as the year of AI on the smartphone. And why is that? Because a lot of the promises that I think these companies wanted to deliver on with this idea of AI 5, even 10 years ago, as far as how it will improve your interaction with your smartphone, how it can detect, know what you intend without you explicitly saying it. All these promises that they kept saying that it would sort of deliver and not quite. Everything that we're seeing now coming out of not everything, actually, I should retract that, but a lot of what we're seeing now that coming from generative AI clues us into the fact that, oh, hey, wait a minute, maybe this is actually kind of finally possible, that we can just talk like we talk to someone else, and these things are smart enough to understand what that actually means and convert it into the right action. And that is a huge, that has the potential to be a huge quality of life improvement for smartphone users. And so if that's the year of 2024 in smartphones, that's a huge step forward. And I know we're going to talk about that in a few stories ahead as well, kind of what's coming to Apple.
I've been holding this story for this conversation just as like I see something happening. But, we've been taking Sawyer to the vet a bit. He's an older man. So,
this is your dog.
My dog Sawyer. Yes. Not my grandpa, not my whatever.
He's like older man, older dog man. But yes.
Older dog man. Yes. So he's got to go to the vet a bit to get checkups and he gets laser therapy and stuff like that. Anyway, so we've been going to the vet quite a bit. And a lot of times I notice with Apple Maps, when I'm going home, it will give me a prompt and say going home. I'll get a notification. It'll only take you 5 minutes. Oh, okay, great. So I'll click the notifications. All of a sudden I'm using Apple Maps. okay, first of all, because I've been going to the vet a lot, it seems like the phone knows that. And I usually attribute that with a calendar invite, like, oh, I'm calendaring. So that's why they know that I'm going here or there or whatever. The vet visits, at some point, I just wrote laser. I just wrote whatever, and no location, no whatever.
Right.
But one morning we got into the car getting ready to go to the vet, and it just gave me the notification. Are you going to the vet? It's going to take you blah, blah, blah. I'm like, what? I didn't put it freaked me out because I didn't make the normal calendar invite.
It was the repetition where it was like, I'd like to help you. I used to have the same thing at a dog park, across California where I lived before. I never put that into anything. It was just a dog park I went to when I felt like it. But I went there often enough that CarPlay, when I got into my car, was like, it will be 18 minutes. And I'm like, how did you know?
How did you know? I have to say it freaked me out only because I'm still using Google Maps and Waze. I'm learning a little bit more to use. I'm learning a little bit more, or I'm having and using Apple Maps a little bit more just to learn. And it's completely different from when it first launched, right? So it's definitely better. It's not sending you to a lake when there's nothing there. But I don't know. It just kind of like, it really astonished me. Like, okay, you're trying to learn. Now, can you learn things that I really want? Next.
Right. Yeah. Besides just like, I drive to the same 5 places over and over in my daily life.
Great. I'm predictable.
Helpful. It's funny about Google Maps versus Apple Maps. I at this point, I find them neck and neck. I don't really prefer one over the other, but sometimes someone will, a friend, for example, made reservations at a restaurant and is like, oh, here's the address, in text. And, I click on the link. Thanks. Yeah, great. Then I don't have to look it up myself. And sometimes that goes to Apple Maps. Sometimes it goes to Google Maps. It could go to another map application, but it's usually one of the two. But when I get in my car, sometimes I don't realize that. And so I open up my Maps app and I'm like, because I've got my center console and I'm like, well, where is it? And so my phone is talking. CarPlay is like, we have no idea what you're doing. I have to sync the two. There are definitely improvements that can be made. Sure. Again, not to belabor the CarPlay point, because for lots of reasons, I actually really enjoy CarPlay. I don't know what I would do without it, quite frankly. I guess I would just have my phone speaker talking to me instead.
Oh, that's so 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Jason, what's your perception of Apple Maps? I mean, I'm sure are you using Google Maps primarily? Yeah.
I mean, for anyone who doesn't have any, insight into my background, I have only ever really had Android. I've used iOS a couple of times, and by used here, I'm meaning like used it for like a couple of weeks. You know what I mean? Yeah. Each time, primarily because when I was at Twit, I would trade devices with Megan Maroney, and she would get the Android experience for a couple of weeks, and I get the iOS experience, and so that's really the majority of my kind of like firsthand insight on a lot of the stuff that you probably talk about and live with every single week. So my view on Apple Maps isn't informed by my own experience. And also I find myself resistant to immediately saying, well, Apple Maps is bad because I use Google Maps. I'm just used to Google Maps and I know what I get out of it. And I'm sure Apple Maps has been around for so long. I'm sure it's ironed out a lot, if not most of the major kinks, and it will always be painted as, oh yeah, you remember when they launched and they totally screwed things up, because that happened. But that was a really long time ago. I'm sure the Maps is way better, now, and I don't doubt that at all.
Like I said, neck and neck. They have some differences, but for the most part, they're both going to get you where you want to go with some settings in between.
Yeah, I mean, in Google Maps, you know what? Honestly, they fill that app with so many different things that it's almost a negative at this point. It's like, you know what? It doesn't have to be the locations everything app. And so, like it gets me where I need to go. That's what I really care about when I open up a Maps app. And as long as it's doing that, then it's kind of doing the majority of what I expect out of it. And I imagine Apple Maps does that. So.
Well, that kind of leads, I guess, us to the next question that this is, and I don't mean this to be like incendiary, but we got to do it because we got you, Jason, on the show. Is
Okay.
what is who is the Android consumer versus the iOS consumer? Now, back in the day, again, we're talking about these ecosystems that have evolved so much from where they were at one point. But at one point, it was like, well, Android phones are more open. The phones generally tend to be, cheaper. If you're looking for a feature phone, you're going to get, an Android device, whereas, the iPhone, is just a premium phone. That's also changed. I mean, even the cheapest iPhone is still not a cheap smartphone.
Right.
But Apple has made some concessions there. But how do you feel the landscape is now?
Yeah, I mean, I will just kind of preface it by saying this is a conversation that is difficult to do without some people feeling like labeling, stereotypes, that sort of stuff enters into play. So
Yes.
understand
And
that,
that's I'm not trying to back you into a corner, but
no, not at all. But I think it's important because like in preparation for the show, I was kind of like looking for like some reports around this just to kind of get a sense of like, well, what is the typical Android user? What do these statistics say versus like iOS? And I think a lot of what you're saying still is kind of true. Like some of the reports say an Android consumer is generally older than iPhone users, generally more predominantly male than female, although I think that's still pretty close. More frugal, more value conscious compared to an iOS or iPhone user. But all these things, it's like, yeah, that applies to some people. It doesn't apply to everybody, but it is hard numbers. And I do think that one thing, and you tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I think one thing that has existed for a long time as far as like the perception of what an Android user is okay with versus an iOS user is that Android users are okay with the fact that not everything is in its place. Like decisions haven't necessarily been made for you about how your phone operates. You have the ability to go in there and really get nerdy with how you customize it and everything. And I think that's been a perception about Android. I don't know if that's necessarily true for all. Well, in fact, I can say it's not true for all Android users. There is certainly a small subset that really, really cares about that stuff. But I think a lot of Android users, like if I look at my sister, she's an Android user back home, and like she doesn't care about any of that. She just goes in the store and she's used to having a Samsung phone, so she goes, okay, well, what's the latest Samsung phone? Whatever that is, I'll have it. And it does the smartphone-y things that she needs to do. And for whatever reason, she's never been that intrigued by moving to an iPhone. I think to a certain degree because there's some difficulty in switching platforms, and a lot of users just don't want to deal with that because they got a million other things to worry about. It's like the last thing I need to worry about is switching to a new platform and then learning how to use it, and everything that I'm used to being over here is now over here. And so they don't, but they're not thinking in terms of iOS versus Android. They're just thinking in terms of the phone they have and that they're used to.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I have I didn't get the first iPhone when it first launched because I was still clinging on to that BlackBerry life. But once I did get my first iPhone, I'd never had another smartphone. Oh, look, Kaiser is calling me. No, thank you. Not right this second.
Are you in Northern California or Southern California? And if so,
right, yes. Did someone in your house break a leg recently? Indeed they did. Not me, everybody. But I've never deviated. It's iPhones all the way down. Now, that's just a preference. It's not because I think it's better. It's just what I know. When I get a new phone, I just say iCloud backup, all good to go.
You know what to expect. It's all there. Bloop. It's ecosystem.
Hardware gets upgraded. Everything else in the background more or less stays the same, except when iOS gets new features, which a lot of people get. You don't need new hardware necessarily for that. There are some exceptions, obviously. But going back to you mentioned, Jason, iPhone users tend to be younger. And again, I think
according to stats,
that's regional for sure. There are certain regions where, there are a lot of upwardly mobile people financially, and, Android is dominant. So, your mileage may vary depending on where you are, but we have seen reports And some of it is a little silly, I think, and some of it is based in truth, especially with the younger set of, oh, if somebody has the green bubble, in a message thread, everyone's, the iPhone folks are like, oh no, who's the Android person, kind of thing. And it reminds me of like Nike versus Reebok when I was in 8th grade, kind of thing. Like why did some kids go like, well, if you're not wearing Nikes, you can't play basketball with us? It's style can be very fickle and kind of petty, right? I think what it comes down to is how does the ecosystem work for you? Does it, I don't know, box you out of friendships? If so, well, that would suck.
Yeah.
But I don't know anybody who says that, and I know lots of Android users who we don't have a problem communicating with each other at all.
Well, I have some problems communicating with iPhones with my Android device, but that, and there's certain technological reasons why that
does that go beyond like the emoji didn't go through type thing, or is that what you're talking about?
No, totally. I mean, yes. At the end of the day, it's not a friendship breaker, and it's not a platform switcher. For me, you know what I mean? But
yeah,
but I can see how some people, get annoyed by that, because I do encounter that on my Android device reasonably regularly, where I will be in a group chat, like group messaging situation, and I know somewhere in there is an iOS user, and almost certainly the whole experience in that particular group chat, not in any other of my SMS threads or whatever, in that particular chat, things won't be delivered. It'll show me that there's a message coming through, and then it'll just spin endlessly, and I will never get it. And, so things like that are annoying, but they're not enough for me personally to motivate me to be like, well, I had to switch over. I do understand that for some people that is enough. If you did have
to switch over in a situation like that, that's where you get into sort of like what's going on here? Not that we're going to make this a show about antitrust, but it's like, you can't be forced to, buy into another ecosystem when you're perfectly happy with your own, because there is interoperability problems. Well, I mean, there is, and I guess you can, but you shouldn't.
Yeah, my anyway, my brother-in-law is a tech journalist, and my sister has worked in tech companies before, so we're very techie people. And anyway, my brother-in-law has been an Android user for the longest time, and he switched to iOS a couple years ago just to learn and give him better knowledge when reporting about iOS and just use cases and this, that, and the other. Well, last year he moved back. So we had this 2-year sort of group chat where it was all kumbaya. Everything was working. And since he moved back, there's just little things, because my sister is going to share her daughter's videos from whatever. And, it's just not formatted the same. Sometimes it's really odd. Yeah. Sometimes we'll get the video really well, and sometimes it'll just shrink it in a weird resolution. And, there is a little bit of me. I'm like, it's because Sean moved to Android.
Yeah, well, but, I mean, yes,
and I don't say that.
You know what I mean? And
I don't get mad.
But I don't know where on the scale that, if you were to apply blame in that situation, I don't know where it lands. Does it land on Apple, or does it land on Google and the Android ecosystem? I mean, I'll be really curious to see how this whole Apple RCS thing happens. And I think I saw somewhere in here some of the features of the upcoming iOS is that potentially that RCS is going to actually be a part of that. So I'll be really curious to see how much that addresses this, because I'm not in the camp that thinks that Apple's going to completely acquiesce here and be like, all right, we'll give you everything. I do think that there's going to be some things that are held back and some things that are compatible across both platforms. But what does that materialize? What does that look like from an experiential perspective when you're actually conversing with someone on the other platform once this is all rolled out? Does it actually iron out 90% of the issues? If so, then great. I think that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
Because it is really irritating when things like that happen. And you want to blame someone because you're like, I just want to see that damn message.
Sean, I'm sorry. I don't blame you. But every once in a while, we're like, why is this video? I can't see this video. But then we'll get resent. It's totally fine. But it's
I was on a group text not that long ago because a bunch of us were all going to someone's wedding, and so we knew we were going to, see each other pretty soon. So it was sort of like, okay, where's everybody staying? Blah blah blah. And there was a green bubble, and then things were breaking, and I was starting to get weird messages where I was just like, "Who's the green bubble?" I don't care that you're on an Android. All I want is to know what hotel you're staying at and what time your plane lands because you're my friend. Like,
It's very important.
And maybe it was because, I don't know, there were too many of us, but it was like we were getting these funny, instead of like, in iMessage, for example, Eileen might say, "Hey, I'll be there in 10. I send her a thumbs up, not even an emoji, but, it's the tap back.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, if she was on Android, it'd be like, Eileen sent a thumbs up emoji, where I'm like, okay. I mean, I guess the sentiment is the same, but a little clunky.
Yeah.
But even that doesn't work sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just get a weird message where you're like, what is happening? Who's on the Android?
Well, you know what I did a couple of months ago, or like a month and a half ago, we went on a big trip. Like our family, three other families. So there was 4 different families. We went on a trip to Park City for snowboarding and skiing and all that. It was a great time. But while we were there, we did something unprecedented because there was a mixture of Android and iOS users. And we wanted to be sure everyone was on the same page. We took a page out of the world's playbook and we used WhatsApp. And it worked really well.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like we're in this weird little microcosm, in the US where like we rely so heavily and insist on using SMS because it's easier, yet we put up with all this bullsh. And everybody else is like, I mean, anytime, and I'm sure you've had this, anytime you talk about this, any of your international listeners are like, yeah, well, I just use WhatsApp. We all use WhatsApp. I don't even know that this is a big
100%.
issue for you because everyone uses WhatsApp. It's like, well, I guess why don't we do that? I don't know. Why don't we?
I don't know.
A friend of mine she's American. She grew up in Colorado, but now lives in the Netherlands in Amsterdam. She and I text on iMessage. She has an iPhone. I mean, works fine. We're on several group texts that is all iMessage based. But at some point, I don't know, she sent me a thing where it was like, did you see my WhatsApp? And I was like, oh, yeah, no, I have notifications for WhatsApp turned off because I never really think about it unless I'm overseas. In which case, you're going to just, I don't know, you're going to know people who use it or other people are using it. It really, it always feels like an international thing to me. And that's very US centric. And I'm aware of this. But she was like, do you care? Like, do you really want to use iMessage? Because to be honest, because she was actually coming to the States. So we were talking a little bit more than usual because she was going to be in LA actually. And, we were trying to figure out when we could get together for dinner. And she was like, do you care about WhatsApp? I mean, it would just like all my other friends are on WhatsApp. It would be so much easier for me if you don't care. And I'm like, I don't care. And for the first time, this is like a month ago, I was like, yeah, I mean, the only thing about WhatsApp is I sit at my, the computer that I'm sitting at right now, running a Mac Mini, desktop life. Yeah, and WhatsApp is so mobile. And she's like, no, there's a Mac OS app for WhatsApp. And I was like, there is? Didn't know that. Never even thought about it. Now it's open right now. Works like a charm. And I've actually kind of, I don't know, not that like some person I talked to 4 years ago in Paris is, now we're chatting every day, but I'm like, this is great. It actually does work better in all senses of the word if you have a bunch of people on various ecosystems because it's just, a different protocol.
Everybody can do the same thing. Everybody can heart and you can see it and everything. I'm taking Korean classes and we have a group chat and it was started with WhatsApp. I don't even remember why, but I do know that one of my classmates lives in Germany. So I don't remember if it was her who suggested whatever. It just feels like a normal messaging app that is, I don't know. It just feels like that's what it's supposed to be for everybody. And when I'm using Messenger on iOS and I see broken things, I'm like, why am I using this with everybody? I don't know. So shout out to WhatsApp.
Yeah. Even after going through certain use cases where I'm like, yeah, it is kind of broken sometimes. It's like, why don't we all just bail and use something like WhatsApp? I'm not saying WhatsApp is the only solution. There are others.
Right. Signal,
but it's a great example of a solution where we would just stop having this conversation.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a
Exactly.
solution that was actually designed to work for everybody. And I mean,
Yeah.
me not being an iOS user, I haven't had enough experience with an iPhone communicating with all my friends who also have iPhones to the point to where I'm like, hey man, iMessage, like, why would I use anything else? Because when I communicate with people, we're all on the same platform. I have to imagine, that system enables certain things that if you aren't, obviously, if you're an Android in that conversation, there's a lot of features that are not possible. But if you're an iOS user connecting with other iOS users and you can rely on those features to work, that's got to be pretty sweet. But then the flip side of that is, yeah, but you know what? Because it doesn't work for everybody, then you on the iOS side have to put up with the fact that there's going to be annoyances when you inevitably have someone in your messages that doesn't have an iOS device, and that limits things for you and you're bummed because it doesn't work. Of course, I'm speaking for you and I don't mean to be doing that, but just to illustrate the point. And then, same for Android, there's the unlimited frustration that I think all Android users have used when we're communicating with someone who's on iOS and that picture doesn't come out right, or it's like so low res you could hardly put it on a stamp, or whatever the case may be. And it's like, well, yeah, but there's all these other things that exist that actually tackle all of this stuff, right? Like, I'm not saying WhatsApp is the right selection either, but I am saying maybe we would all be a whole lot frustrated if we just used something that was cross-platform, truly cross-platform,
Truly
meant to work for
cross-platform.
everyone and not just microcosms.
I also, and listen, I'm lucky enough to be able to afford various devices that they're not free. I mean, if you want to spend money on electronics, you have lots of choices and that all adds up. I just bought a new TV and, it's not the fanciest TV in the world, but I mean, I had to save up for that thing. Go LG. Very, very happy with my LG, but, the OLED, the blacks really are black.
Yeah.
But again, it's so much of this is just, hey, where are you right now? What's your budget? What do you need to do? And that almost comes back to the AI conversation a bit, where sometimes someone will say, you get a lot of these, AI, the capabilities are so crazy. It's like, okay, well, what's the everyday capability that helps me? I don't need to write a resume right this second. I mean, I guess I'm always kind of thinking about that, but that doesn't need to happen. I was putting together a scope of work for a freelance project for a company recently, and I was like, let's try. Let's have ChatGPT give me the first pass. Was pretty good, I will say. I don't do that every day though. That's that's an occasional thing. Some of the, the conversations of okay, well, how would this help iOS? Since we're talking about Apple stuff, it's like, you could get a Keynote slide deck built for you. It's like, well, that works for people who need to do things like that. I don't make slideshow, I don't do things like that regularly. Even when I worked for a company where I had to do that, it was still occasional. But I guess it's like, yeah, it's nice to have in your back pocket. But I wonder what that everyday thing is, because I feel like we still are so impressed by what AI, and I'm using that as a blanket term, of course, but what it's capable of. But it's like, well, does it help me, write my news stories for DTNS every day? I've tried that. It's like, it helps, but then I still have to check the work to the point where I'm like, I'm just going to write the paragraph myself. It's like I'm trying to prove something that I don't need to prove. So yeah, we're still in that stage of I mean, again, I'm also telling Amazon's assistant to turn my lights on and off, all day, every day, and, make the living room light one brighter, stuff, because I'm just used to it. It's like, there's probably a better way to do this, but I'm like, but I just have one already. It's better than nothing.
Yeah, I've seen some interesting use cases, but I think they're very few success use cases, like someone who used AI to create a book and sold it and sold that book on Pinterest and made tons of money, was able to navigate through using Chat GPT to understand the level of the audience, what type of, I think this is an advice book, and whatever target audience, able to kind of like type in, these are the things that you should include in your ebook. And then, again, this person was successful. I don't know how many can duplicate that in whatever, genre of an ebook you want to make. Maybe that was just an anomaly, but it was interesting, like using the capabilities of AI to help hone in even more. And now I'm even seeing on like even Instagram, use Chat GPT to find your audience and to create your calendar of content. So this is, if you know your target audience, you know where you want to grow, like where you want to be at from X followers to X followers in like 2 or 3 months. Supposedly, now I haven't tried this, maybe I should to see what happens. You can use ChatGPT to help kind of create a organized system to help you get to that growth, and exponential growth, by the way, not just like a couple hundred. So again, does it happen for everybody? Why am I getting a thumbs up? Why am I thumbs upping myself? Does it happen for everyone? Probably not. It's probably more few than many mass cases can do this, but it is still a use case, right? Like, okay, you used it to create a social media presence and was able to grow your following exponentially to be able to start making money. Okay, great. Same for the ebook person. So anyway, I've just seen as I was looking into AI late last year and kind of like, okay, what should I be using? And I was thinking, I just wanted to understand, in every area possible. Like I'm trying to build a website right now that is built off AI, my own personal website. And there's something that I'm really excited about.
You've shown me some examples of stuff where you're like, I didn't even like try. This is just like a first pass where I'm like, this is not bad.
Yeah. There's some good templates.
There's a lot of kind of like throw something at AI and get something back where you're like, not bad. Images, or, text to images or even video now, because we're getting into that. I mean, much of that is like so exciting / scary. And then, you get all the other people being like, but not perfect. Not perfect. And
we're not
Jason, I know you think about this a lot. So, it's kind of like, do we sort of embrace the fact that it's evolving? Because sometimes I feel like people will go like, well, it's like really impressive, but like not perfect. It's like, well, neither are people.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, as I've been listening to this conversation, that it's funny that you said the not perfect thing, because that was kind of rolling through my head, but maybe not from the same context. I see all of these AI tools, everything that you just talked about, I've seen them as a good collaboration / research tool. I do not see AI personally. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable going to AI and saying, create an ebook and make it on this thing, and then I publish it in my name or whatever. Even publishing it in my name with a little quote thing that says used AI to generate this. Like, I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. I need personally for the human element to be involved. And and I don't see these tools necessarily being like, I don't see the success of these tools, and maybe I'm totally wrong, being that we get to a certain point to where we never have to do anything anymore again. And we can just say, you create everything that exists on the internet and exists for all these jobs. And we can just like take our foot off the gas and go sit on a beach for the rest of our life. Like, I don't know, maybe and you know what? There's probably going to be some people who are able to do that because they figured out some sort of system. But by and large, I don't think that's where we're headed. I see these tools as ways to give us a little bit of extra kind of superpowers. It's like, if it was hard for me to write, a summary of a news story because I have blank page syndrome, use ChatGPT, give me a couple of sentences to start with, and then I go back over those sentences and I put them in my own words, or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? I don't know. I think the lack of perfection out of these things, like, oh yeah, but it's not perfect. Personally, I don't think it matters. It doesn't need to be perfect. Nothing is perfect. Perfection is a myth.
I don't know. I mean, this is sort of a dumb analogy, but it's like, let's say Eileen is a great cook. She makes this dish just perfectly. And I know what ingredients are involved, but somehow I just don't do it as well. I've got the spatula.
Yeah. Oh, I've
I've got the
experienced
fork
that.
and knife
I followed
afterwards.
the recipe to a T, and it
Right,
did
like
not
it's
turn
like-
out the way it should.
We don't all use the same tools with the same desired effect. We just don't, because we're, little special snowflakes.
Yeah.
So, I think
We're
AI
perfectly imperfect.
Yes. Well, yes. Sometimes very imperfect. Spot Monk in our chat did mention code generation. I know that's extremely popular, with a variety of language models. I'm not writing a lot of code these days, but that's a good example of something where sometimes the AI is just the best way to go, or the fastest.
Yeah, and I think that's probably still kind of proving itself too. Like is it creating code that's 100% bug proof or bug free or whatever? Like, do I think that it's going to continue to improve in that regard? Yeah, absolutely. All this stuff is going to continue to improve. But imagine being, and maybe this is rose tinted glasses, but imagine being the coder who knows all that you know about coding and can use these tools to do things that would normally take you much longer to do, but use them faster to free yourself up for other more intensive things, or to, come up with big picture ideas, whatever. Like, what does it look like 5 or 10 years down the line when we get over the hump of being afraid of what all these things may do, and we realize what they actually can do, and we accept them for what they are instead of what they could be, or potentially the devastation and destruction that they're going to do on society and humanity. I mean, I think there's just a lot of potential and a lot of power if we do what we've done with so many other technology tools, which is see them as an opportunity to kind of expand on our tool set and do things that we couldn't do before.
Yeah.
Yeah. W. Scottis one says, I really need these AI models to do photo and video better because I'm bad at design. And I'm the same way. And I saw a demonstration on storyboarding. I'm horrible at storyboarding, but I think it's useful in certain cases.
Super,
even if you're just doing, a social media post, it's very helpful. But I did see this demonstration. I'm sorry, I can't remember the software, but it was amazing because they just typed in a couple of words and it looked like someone actually drew, step 1, opening the door, step 2, grabbing keys, but in a way that it was drawn, because they made the prompt be draw in pencil, person opening, what you would visualize, and it generated it just through the text. And I'm like, oh, this is an application that could be really helpful for those of us that are like, I'm better at editing, but the design of it, I'm terrible. I have to have someone, design it for me. I mean, I'm looking for a logo right now, and I'm like, okay, I guess I can use Canva tools right now, which is fine. And I'm kind of tweaking what some templates are on there, but it's better if I could afford a designer to give me something, what I'm visualizing.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Versus
And
trying to kind of manipulate
you sort of go
what
like,
is.
okay, V1, good, but make it green, and
Right.
iterate on that.
Yeah. So anyway,
Certain
I
AI
just thought the
tools are
promise
actually
of
really
certain
effective
tools.
at that.
Yeah. And then in the same demonstration I attended, this was actually a Microsoft production weekend. I saw them manipulating, photos, or just adding text, saying, okay, I want to see a living room, but then the prompt changed in space, in, a forest and whatever. And like just the couple changes of words. And I don't know how much this application is to pay for. It really transformed it. Maybe not exactly what you want it to be, but it presented something that, oh, okay, this could be useful in just visualizing. Whether or not you're going to use it,
Well, and that's like the beauty of, anything artistic. I have hired people because I have no design skill either. And not that you have none, but I really have none. And I've hired people before for projects to be like, all right, they want a website, or, they want album art, for a podcast, or, just things that, I want someone who really knows what they're doing to give me some options. And sometimes those options come back to me and I'm like, I didn't even really tell you to do that, but I like it. Thank
Mhm.
you.
Mhm.
You know, and now it sparked, some more creativity
sparked
in my
something,
mind.
yeah.
And that's kind of fun too. It's not just about being like, do this exact thing exactly how I want it in my mind, because that sort of squelches creativity for all of us. It's like,
Right.
here's my idea. Give me something, and then let's talk. So
Right.
that part of it I think is really fun.
Yeah, in creating the logo for our show, I used Canva, but I originally they had new AI tools. So I was like, "Ooh, show logo, Apple Vision show." I put in some of it, and it gave me back some of the most terrible things, like an apple, a half-eaten apple, and some weird colors
Yes.
that we would never
Right.
use. So there
Yeah.
was a little bit of like, I ended up just using a template and changing the font and stuff like that, which was fine. But okay, I guess A for effort, because you really honed in on my words, and then I changed the words, but it just kind of got worse. And so then it just like they had like a microphone kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
of course.
again,
Yeah.
some of it
Because
is
you probably
very
put in there
generic.
somewhere podcast or show.
Yes,
Like, oh, well,
yes.
then you need some
Yeah.
headphones
Yeah.
and a
Right.
microphone in there
I'm
because
like,
that's what.
well,
Right. Let's
then
give you the on the nose feedback
Yes.
first.
Yeah, you get a
Exactly.
lot of that for
Yeah.
this.
I started to
Yeah.
change it to aesthetic logo just to give it a little bit more style and
Yeah.
charm, and it got a little bit better there, but
You-
not quite there yet.
Yeah, an interesting service that I've come across, one of my favorites, is really kind of a good AI site to use for exactly what you're talking about. It's called ideogram.ai.
Okay.
And
Going
its
there now.
specialty is it's an image generator, but they've done a lot of work honing the textual aspect of it. So you can write in, I want this to say blah, blah, blah. And I'd say about 75% of the time, it'll actually say the blah, blah, blah. Sometimes it does the weird AI thing where it adds different vowels and doesn't at all say what you intend for it to. But what it allows you to do is kind of remix your output in a really easy approach. So you could start with Apple Vision show and it would give you the apple, and then you could be like, okay, remix this, but replace the apple with the blah, 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 and da, 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 da. And it's almost like the more I've used it, the more I realize you're learning a skill as the human on how to like direct someone else to give you what you're looking for, how to take the image that you have in your mind and how to explain that in English in real terms in a way that you end up, which I guess at the end of the day is what LLMs are all about. And, all this generative AI is take this text and convert it into something something artistic or whatever. But it's a really good, like, that's where we start to learn new skills as well. Because I could take that skill and get hired in a position at some company where I've got people working underneath me, and now I need to, convey to them exactly what I'm looking for. Now suddenly, like, I have a language with which to speak, to be able to communicate how I take what's in my mind and put it down on paper. I don't know. There's a lot to learn from that too. But
Yeah.
yeah. What do you
just
want to
tried.
see out of iOS then? If AI is coming to iOS, like, is there any example of like, well, this is something that I think would actually be really useful for me?
Gosh, when it comes
It's a
to
hard
iOS,
one to spring. I understand.
when it comes to iOS, I'm sort of a weird iOS user where I told Eileen and everyone who listened to the show ad nauseum, give me a laptop, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
I don't really want a small form factor unless I'm outside the house, unless I'm on the move. I've got a small purse where, I kind of like carry my laptop bag with me type thing. So when it comes to iOS, it's like, as far as getting information back that isn't like, oh, where is this restaurant? Directions, go. I don't know.
Yeah.
How much that's a thing that I need, but I say that about stuff all the time because that thing I need, I don't realize I need because it doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, totally. I think that's where we're at right now, is all these companies really want some sort of an AI play on their mobile devices. And so they're playing around with a lot of different things, and who knows what this all kind of settles into in the next couple of years. One thing that I've liked about how Google is doing a lot of this is, instead of AI being a destination that you have to think to go to Google's really kind of taken the approach of building AI into the things you're already using. And I think that, and I'm imagining that's what Apple is going to do as well. To a certain degree, they're hopefully going to take some of these tools and integrate them into the things that you're already using so that it's not something you have to think twice about. It's just that thing you're using now suddenly gets a lot more useful. Like, having in Google Docs the ability to generate an image, to throw into your doc. You don't have to go to another site and generate an image. You can just say, hey, Google Docs, I need an image of a horse. Give it to me. And it gives it to you and it puts it in the doc for you.
Yeah.
Things like that, so that I, as a user, don't have to think about anything extra outside of, I just need to do this thing. How can I do it more effectively? How can I do it better?
Well, speaking of what iOS gives you and doesn't give you, we got an email from Andrew who said, in your opinion, what's the biggest hole in the Apple ecosystem? Andrew says, for me, it's a wireless CarPlay dongle. Oh, Andrew, I feel your pain. Andrew says, I've driven a lot of cars with wireless charging and wired CarPlay, but I've never been in a car with wireless CarPlay. Andrew says, I've just done that the once. I'd love a dongle to plug into my car to enable wireless CarPlay. I've seen some aftermarket solutions, but they look janky as heck. So this is funny. A friend of mine who has way more money than I do, actually, he had a car that had CarPlay wired. This is some years ago, so CarPlay was like relatively new in general. And he got a new car. I don't know if it was a lease or not. I don't know. I won't talk too much about his finances, but he could afford a new car. And he got the new car because he's like, well, now it has wireless CarPlay. And I was like, wireless CarPlay? I mean, how hard is it to just plug it into your center console? That's what I have. I have CarPlay in my car. My car is model 2019. So, it's not brand new, but it's pretty new as far as cars go. And I've just never once been like, it's so hard to have a cord. But then my car had to go into the shop. This is like a year ago. Go into the shop and my insurance gave me a rental car for the amount of time that the car was in the shop, which was, a week, maybe even a little bit more. Wireless CarPlay. And I was like, okay, now we're cooking.
Once you used it, then you're like,
yeah.
Oh, actually, I get it.
Well, I mean, that's like anything that like my mom, she got a wireless vacuum cleaner recently. And she's like, why would you ever have a vacuum with a cord again? I'm like, I do. It's fine.
You don't want to spend the money right now.
Yeah, it's not a life ruiner, but it's like, okay, that is pretty cool.
I've kind of felt that way about wireless charging in general. It's not an inconvenience for me to plug my phone into my charger at night or set it on the, right next to my bed. There's just a cable hanging there and I just literally go, plink, and it's in.
Right. Yeah.
And I know for some people that is like total, full on deal breaker. Oh, it doesn't have wireless charging. No, I couldn't be bothered. But I don't know. I just find it, it's not that inconvenient. Charges faster.
I would love a world where we had no cables for anything and it just things just worked. But we're getting there. Slowly but surely.
Yeah. Oh, for sure we are.
But Andrew, I feel your pain. I think, there are a lot of things about CarPlay where I'm like, why isn't this app a CarPlay app? One of the things I use on iOS the most. Now, maybe part of that is like, I'm thinking in my mind, like Slack. I get a lot of Slack messages. Now it's like, I understand that a lot of that is text and you're not supposed to be doing, heavy text, anything while you're driving, messages included, but iMessage works fairly well. If I'm on the move, I'm meeting Eileen, I'm going to be 10 minutes late. It's like, it's very easy for me to do all of the stuff hands-free with CarPlay. You could do that with certain, automotive models themselves. But since we're talking about CarPlay, it works really well, but it is limited. It would be nice to see, what the next gen of vehicle stuff looks like.
Well, 9 of 12 in our chat says we have a Hyundai Sonata. We are not sponsored by Hyundai here, just letting you know. And it has wireless CarPlay. So I'm not just calling it out just because,
I will say that rental car I had while my car was in the shop was the Chevy Malibu. also wireless
Oh,
CarPlay.
okay.
It was a new car, it was real nice actually. I was like, maybe I'm a Chevy Malibu person, I mean, I actually kind of like this
For this
car.
one magical week you were.
So
Sarah.
Andrew, two new options for you. If you feel like getting a new car, which you probably don't, but Hyundai Sonata and the Chevy Malibu.
Well,
There you go.
yes, yeah. When I pay off my Volvo, which is somewhere in the very distant future, I will think about this. First order of business. But all right, well, listen, we're getting to the end of our hour here. Jason Howell, such a pleasure to have you on the show. We're so glad that you were able to join us.
course,
Like
anytime.
Eileen said at the beginning of the show, we wanted to have you a couple weeks ago, and life got in the way. So happy to have you on our show today. Let folks know where they can keep up with all that you do, because your work has changed a little bit as of late, but you're real busy.
I'm busier now than I was when I was working full time. It's great, full time at Twit. And I was just saying before the show, it's hard to know when you're suddenly out of a job, whether you're self-employed or unemployed. I feel like both, because I'm working harder than ever and I'm not getting paid that much for it. But that's okay, because I'm having a lot of fun creating shows like Android Faithful here on the DTNS network, of course. AI Inside with Jeff Jarvis. AIinside.show is the show page for that. And then I'm now doing kind of challenging myself with one piece of kind of longer form edited content for YouTube every week. So it's usually kind of in the form of like a review, tech review, that sort of stuff. So go to yellowgoldstudios.com. That's just like a link that'll take you to my YouTube channel. And yeah, thank you for the invite. It's always fun to hang out with both of you, and have the opportunity to talk about Apple, which I don't get a whole lot of that in my life. So it was a lot of fun.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Yeah, but what we've always told people from the very beginning is this is an Apple focused show. That's why we're here. That's what we're interested in. But you can't really do that unless you can compare it to other
sure.
stuff.
Absolutely.
That's the beauty of it. Apple is not always going to be the best at everything. Sometimes we might think it is, and other times we might want it to catch up to, for example, Android in some respect, or different hardware model from somebody who isn't at the Cupertino complex. So again, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Well, if you've got feedback for us, we would like to hear it. Feedback at applevisionshow.com is where to send those emails. Thanks to everybody who's been writing in. We're getting a lot of good feedback from you, so please do keep those coming. Ideas for future shows, ideas, tips and tricks you might have, we will take all of it. We want to know more from you, so we make the show that you want us to deliver to you every week. Eileen, did I miss anything?
Oh, just follow us on Instagram and TikTok. We get some comments there too. And there's been a couple of you didn't know. Well, thank you. We may talk about that in future shows, but we're active over there too. So check us out on the socials.
All right. Well, episode 7 in the can. We'll see you all next week. Thanks to everybody for joining us. If you're listening after the fact, just a reminder, we do record the show live on Mondays to 2:15-ish Pacific time, right after Daily Tech News Show ends. We're on the same YouTube channel. We'd love to have you join us live if you can, but otherwise, please subscribe. Tell a friend if you think they might enjoy the show, wherever they might get their podcasts. Until next time, see y'all later.
Bye. Oh man,
All right.
forever. So there's a couple things I was going to bring up, and I'm like, oh, we need to move on to the next thing.
I know. Honestly, I know. I was like, okay, well, we're gonna wrap this one up, because I was just like, we've been talking for over an hour. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a good
Honestly,
problem to have.
It is a good
indeed.
problem. It is a good problem.
It's like, imagine if we were like, half an hour ago, like, and now what? Jason, what'd you have for breakfast?
Oh boy, have you ever been in the middle of a podcast and that's happened?
I have. Yes.
I've been in the middle of like an interview, and like I blast through, like an hour-long interview, and about halfway through, it's like, okay, well, we've talked about all the things I wanted to talk about. Yeah,
well, or
it
you
can be a little
get
stressful.
Yeah, it usually has only happened when I'm interviewing somebody that I maybe don't know that well.
Yes. Well, yes,
you know, so you
exactly.
get like concise answers, which is
Yes.
not a bad
Oh,
thing.
yeah.
But you're like, okay,
It's like
Expand on that. Give me feeling.
certain
Give me some
people-
feeling.
yeah,
certain people have been trained for answering questions on TV, which is different than answering questions on podcasts, right? Like
Yeah.
Right.
they're aiming for, that 20-second soundbite that's going to be put into like a news clip or whatever. And
Right.
on podcasts, we're like, nah, you know what? Stretch it out. It's cool. Keep talking. Let us
yeah.
know all the details.
Of course, it depends. That's the beauty of podcasts is like there are no rules. I mean, we're starting to get certain like, okay, you got your hour podcast, you got your half-hour podcast, you got your 10-minute, or 90-minute. I mean, but we don't have to. We put our commercial breaks where we want. Okay, people.
We do what we want.
Yeah.
I do what I want.
We'll find a moment of pause. Actually, speaking of AI, Acast will just identify if I wanted to click the button, and it'll find the pause for me. I kind of choose the pause instead.
But have you
It's
determined
a little
whether
hit and miss.
it's very
yes,
hit and miss.
Yes, no, I do all the choosing, but I see that feature and I'm like, oh,
It
okay,
is
if
funny,
I'm
though.
ever lazy, maybe I'll do that. But
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
I will say that on Know a Little More, I specifically program a ad break in the show. I give it a nice 2-second, blank area,
Yeah.
little silent spot.
Yeah.
And I'll tell Acast, hey, go ahead and just find a spot. It never finds the
It
2-second
never
break.
finds it.
Never, not a single time has it ever found it. It'll pick one like right after. Well, the music's already ramping up. Tom's already getting into the next explanation, and he took a breath. And now you want to give it to me? No, go back. I gave you a 2-second spot.
Yeah.
I don't know. I
will
feel
listen
that is.
to, just so we don't feel like, we're alone. I listen to a few podcasts where it's the same thing. Like there's this one podcast called Watch What Crappens, which is all just like wrap ups of Bravo reality shows. It's not for everybody. It's a very funny show though. And they even
Sounds
have
so
like
Sarah.
a little like music stinger, like it's time for a commercial. But like half the time it'll be like it's time for and then the commercial plays and then it'll come back commercial. Where I'm like, yeah, no one really looked at that very closely.
No, totally.
Not the end of the world, but
Yeah.
it could have been a little bit more seamless.
Could have been better.
Yeah,
been better.
right.
I may or may not have written into a few podcasts, asked them if they needed an editor just to mark the ad spots for them because it's so
Wow.
annoying.
You're like, your show is so annoying at the ad break. Let me help you.
They'd be in like mid-sentence, the ad break
Yeah,
would roll,
that's-
and
that
then
is
a
super
little
annoying.
while later they'd throw to ad, and then they'd just come back and like
Oh, weird. Okay.
someone needed an extra 10 seconds of time.
Yep.
Yep.
If you
Yep.
need that, send it my way because I have the 10 seconds and I'm willing to make your podcast infinitely better.
Yeah, you got to get that right, in my opinion. I mean, any listener is going to be annoyed by.
Well,
when
it's
that happens.
it's breaking that that wall, right?
Yeah.
Because if it's seamless, you just sort of you don't think about it. You're just you kind of I don't know. Ads are a part of lots of podcasts, but but when it goes wonky, you're like, oh yeah, I hate
Not
ads.
for nothing, it is a great way to get me to listen to your ad though.
Really?
Because if it just cuts in the middle of the
because you're like-
sentence, I end up listening to half the ad before I realize
Because you weren't prepared. You didn't get the, all right, coming up
Maybe that
next
is
for blah, blah, blah.
strategy.
For you to like pull out during.
Yeah.
That
It's
is
hard for
strategy
Overcast to
then,
skip
ain't it?
30 seconds when I don't know when to hit the 30 seconds.
Oh man. Jason, hopefully you didn't feel like we did put you in the corner. Even
No.
though you're sitting in the corner.
Nobody puts Jason in the corner, and he wouldn't let us
Somebody
even
said
if we
that.
tried. Besides the
Podcast
physical corner.
Yeah, no, it is totally
No,
the corner of
hey,
the bedroom.
listen, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not a corner, but I
Yeah. Well, you've got a lot of kitschy stuff to show off back there.
I got
You've got a lot of
stuff.
eye candy.
I got
Yeah.
stuff in the background, yeah. But
I've got
it's right behind me.
Really old Len Peralta picture and the corner
Which
of,
I love,
of a
yeah.
thing that my kids made for us. I
love
feel
it.
like I need to put something official here, maybe move that. Yeah, there's a lot I could do to this corner to spruce it up, but right now it's
I mean,
just very
backgrounds,
hostagey.
I find every time I move to a new place, which is fairly often, but I mean, I just got lucky here. These are like built-ins. I didn't put
Oh, they're
this back.
built-ins. Oh, okay. I
Yeah,
wondered about
yeah.
that. That's nice.
Yeah, the landlord, I don't know. put them in at some point for who even knows why. But I'm like,
Yeah.
it's perfect for a podcast background.
Yeah, it's great.
But, you know, I haven't really thought about it much since I just threw a thesaurus over there. I'm like, it's fine. Yeah, it looks like a book. It works.
Sure.
All right, y'all.
great.
Well, you know, I gotta check in
gotta
on my
go.
little patient.
Yes.
All right. Are we all? Are the uploads all done, or are we still recording?
I think mine
We're
is.
still recording. We need to say goodbye to the
Maybe we
live
should say
audience.
goodbye to the live. Bye,
No, we're still live too.
everybody
Yeah.
live.
Goodbye to the
Bye, everybody.
lives.
Thank
Bye.
you.
This was fun. See you next week.
See y'all later.